She was 60 years old, soft-spoken, gentle, the kind of woman who still believed in second chances even after life broke her heart more than once. He was 29, charming, handsome, mysteriously attentive, the kind of man who knew exactly what to say to make a lonely woman feel seen again. People whispered, some laughed, some prayed for her. But she did not care. She said she finally felt alive again. 2 days after they said I do, that same man did something so dark that even police officers who had seen the worst of humanity refused to talk about it without shaking. When investigators opened the door to their home, the scene inside made one officer walk out and throw up on the grass. If you think you have heard every shocking case before, this one will make you rethink everything you know about love, betrayal, and the kind of evil that can sit quietly beside you pretending to care. Before we go deeper, subscribe if you love real cases that force you to question the world around you. This story is not just disturbing, it is emotional, painful, and a terrifying reminder that trust can be deadly. Now let us go back to where it all began. Her name was Evelyn Cole, a retired school librarian who spent most of her evenings tending to her small garden, reading romance novels that made her feel young again, and praying for one last chance at companionship. She had lived alone for 14 years after her husband passed, and the silence in her house had become a weight that sat on her chest every night. Her friends said Evelyn had the kindest eyes, the kind that made you trust her instantly. The kind that made you wonder why life had been so unfair to her. She never had children. She never had siblings. She had no one to visit her on holidays, no one to check up on her, no one to sit with her and say she mattered, until he appeared. His name was Damien Hart, a man nearly 30 years younger. He walked into her life like a warm breeze after a long winter. He met her in a community book club, but no one really knew where he came from before that. He said he was a freelance photographer. He said he was new in town. He said he had no family. Everything he said sounded just believable enough to keep her hopeful. Evelyn felt something she had not felt in decades. Attention, affection. She said being around Damien made her feel 30 again. Her cheeks would glow when she talked about him. She would smile at her phone for minutes before replying to him, worried she might look too eager. But underneath Damien's soft voice and gentle smile, there was something off, something hidden. Some people noticed it instantly, but Evelyn was blinded by the first real happiness she had touched in years. Her neighbor, Mrs. Turner, said the first time she met Damien, she felt a chill move across her back. She said she saw something in his eyes. Not love, not warmth, something cold. The kind of cold that made her lose sleep for a week. But Evelyn did not see any of that. She only saw kindness. She only saw someone who listened to her stories, held her hand, and made her feel visible again. And when Damien asked her to marry him only 6 weeks after they met, she said yes with tears running down her face. People begged her to slow down. They told her it felt wrong. They told her it felt rushed. They told her they did not trust him. But Evelyn said life was too short to fear happiness. She did not know that her yes would open the door to the darkest 48 hours of her entire existence. 2 days after the wedding, everything in that house changed. Every smile turned into a nightmare. Every promise turned into pain. And every secret Damien had been hiding began to reveal itself in the most terrifying way imaginable. When police later pieced the timeline together, they discovered that the man Evelyn married was not who she thought he was. In fact, he was not even close. The wedding was small, quiet, almost too quiet. Evelyn wore a simple cream dress that she had kept in her closet for years, hoping she would one day have a reason to wear it. Damien wore a black suit that did not match the tone of the ceremony. Even the pastor later said he felt something unsettling when Damien looked at him, like the man was present in body but not in soul. Everyone who attended said Evelyn looked radiant, soft, hopeful. She held Damien's arm like she had finally found a home in someone, but Damien barely looked at her. He smiled only when people were watching him. His eyes kept drifting off, like he was thinking about something else entirely. After the wedding, they went back to Evelyn's home, the place she had lived in for 25 years. A small white house with blue curtains and a rose bush she cared for, like it was her own child. But the moment Damien stepped inside, the air shifted. Evelyn's niece Laura said it felt like the house itself tensed up, like it knew something was wrong. That first night as husband and wife was the first time Evelyn noticed something strange. Damien was awake until almost 4 a.m. She woke up and saw him sitting in the dark living room, staring at the wall. No light, no sound, just him and the darkness. When she asked if he was okay, he said he was just thinking. He did not explain what he was thinking about. He did not even look at her when he answered. The next morning, things got worse. Damien insisted on handling all the financial paperwork. He wanted access to her account. He wanted her house in both their names. He wanted everything connected to him immediately. When Evelyn hesitated, he hugged her, kissed her forehead, and said it was just to protect them both. But his hands were cold when he held her. Too cold. Later that afternoon, Evelyn's friend Doris came to congratulate her and bring a homemade pie. Damien refused to let her inside. He stood in the doorway blocking the entrance, saying Evelyn was resting. But Doris could hear Evelyn's voice behind him, confused, asking who was at the door. That was the second moment someone should have called for help. That night, neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the house. No one could hear exactly what was said, but a woman's voice sounded like she was begging for something, pleading, trying to calm someone down. Hours later, when the house fell silent, a neighbor saw Damien step outside for a moment. He stood in the yard, breathing heavily, his shirt wrinkled, his hands shaking. He looked up at the sky and whispered something. The neighbor could not make out the words, but she never forgot the expression on his face. A mix of anger, relief, and something darker. Something violent. No one knew that, inside the house, Evelyn had just discovered a secret so horrifying it made her legs buckle beneath her. A secret that made her realize she did not marry a photographer. She did not marry a lonely young man. She did not marry someone who loved her. She married a man who had been hiding a truth that would destroy her life in less than 2 days. Evelyn found it by accident. It was early morning, the second day after the wedding. Damien had stepped out to take a phone call, and Evelyn decided to tidy up the bedroom. She wanted to make their home feel warm, inviting, something a new couple could grow into. She opened his small suitcase to put his clothes in the wardrobe, and that was where everything began to unravel. Inside the suitcase, beneath neatly folded shirts, she found a stack of envelopes. Some were opened, some were sealed. All were addressed to different women across different states. When she picked them up, her hands trembled. Each envelope had the same handwriting, the same tone, the same promises of love, loyalty, and a future together. They were letters of manipulation, letters of seduction, letters designed to pull lonely hearts toward him. Her heart sank deeper with every line she read. Then she found something worse. A hospital bracelet with the name of a woman she had never heard of. A photo of another woman crying in what looked like a police station, a restraining order, and then a printed document that froze something inside her forever. It was a court file. A case involving a man accused of exploiting older women for money. The man's name had been blacked out with thick marker ink, but a faint part of the signature remained visible at the bottom of one page. His handwriting. Damien's handwriting. Her breath hitched. Her knees buckled. She sat on the edge of the bed with the paper shaking in her hands. Tears ran down her cheeks, not because of the lies, but because she suddenly understood that she was not his first. She was not even his second. She was part of a long line of victims. The sound of the front door opening made her jump. Damien walked in. Calm, silent, almost too silent. He stopped in the doorway when he saw the documents in her hands. His expression did not change. He did not gasp. He did not panic. He did not even pretend to be surprised. He just stared at her with eyes that no longer looked human. Empty eyes, eyes that had no warmth in them, as if the person she thought she knew had peeled off his mask and shown his true face. Evelyn whispered his name. That was when he smiled. That smile was the moment Evelyn realized she was not safe, in her own home, with her own husband, the man she thought would protect her for the rest of her life. Damien closed the bedroom door slowly behind him. He walked toward her with the quiet steps of someone who had rehearsed this moment. Someone who knew exactly what came next. Her voice cracked as she said, "You lied to me," he whispered back. "You were never meant to find that." Her blood went cold. Outside, a neighbor saw Damien draw the curtains of the bedroom, even though it was broad daylight. She told police later that the way he dragged those curtains shut made her sick to her stomach, like he was sealing something awful inside the room. If Evelyn had run at that moment, if she had screamed, if she had called someone, maybe the story would have ended differently. But she didn't, because she still believed he could explain. She still believed love could fix something that was never love in the first place. And that mistake would lead to the moment that broke the entire community. What happened next was so disturbing that investigators later said they wished they could erase the images from their minds. But to understand how everything fell apart, you need to know what happened in those 40 minutes behind the closed bedroom door. Damien stood over Evelyn, breathing slow and steady. His calmness was more terrifying than if he had screamed. Evelyn held the documents close to her chest like they could shield her from the truth unraveling in front of her. She whispered, "Why did you do this to me?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her, almost amused. It was the look of a man who felt no guilt, no shame, nothing. He stepped closer. Evelyn stepped back until her legs hit the bed. She trembled so hard her teeth almost chattered. She had spent her whole life believing people were good at their core. But staring into Damien's eyes, she finally saw something she had never seen in anyone before. A void, a darkness so deep it swallowed every ounce of humanity. He took the papers from her hands gently, almost lovingly, then tore them into pieces right in front of her face. The small scraps rained down onto the carpet like dead leaves. She said his name again, softer this time, her voice cracking under the weight of fear. That was when he snapped. His face shifted into something animalistic. His jaw clenched. His breathing changed. His shoulders tightened. It was like a door inside him opened and something monstrous stepped out. Evelyn tried to move. She tried to run. But Damien grabbed her wrist so hard she screamed. The sound was sharp enough that a neighbor paused while sweeping her front porch, thinking she heard something. But the scream died quickly because Damien covered Evelyn's mouth with his hand. For the next 40 minutes, the house held a war between innocence and cruelty, between a woman who wanted nothing but love and a man who wanted control. The sounds that neighbors reported to police later were chilling. Muffled cries, furniture scraping, something heavy hitting the floor. Then silence. A silence so thick it felt like the world had stopped breathing. At one point, Evelyn managed to pull free and run toward the hallway. She nearly made it to the front door. Nearly. But Damien dragged her back, his grip leaving bruises shaped like fingerprints on her arms. Her voice cracked as she begged him to stop. She kept saying she could forgive him. She kept telling him they could work things out. She believed there might still be a piece of humanity inside him. She was wrong. The moment that broke the entire community happened when Damien finally lost all restraint. He shoved Evelyn so hard against the wall that one of her framed photos shattered on the floor. It was a picture of her late husband smiling kindly at the camera, her last piece of safety, broken. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, sobbing. Damien stood over her, chest rising and falling, staring like she was no longer a person, just an obstacle. What he did next would push this story into the darkest territory it had ever entered. The kind of moment that makes people question how evil can exist inside someone so young, so normal-looking, so charming. If someone had knocked on the door at that exact moment, maybe things would have changed. But no one did, because no one knew that inside that quiet little house, a woman's life was being ripped apart by the man she had married just 48 hours earlier. Damien stood over Evelyn, breathing hard, his eyes blank like he was no longer fully human. Evelyn was on the floor, shaking, her palms pressed against the carpet as if she could hold on to the world through it. She whispered his name one last time, not in anger, not in hope, in fear so deep it barely sounded like her voice. That single whisper pushed him over the edge. He grabbed her by the shoulders and lifted her like she weighed nothing. Evelyn tried to scream, but her voice came out in broken gasps. She kept saying, "Please stop." She kept saying she was sorry. She did not even know what she was apologizing for. She just wanted to survive. Then he dragged her into the hallway. This was the moment investigators later said changed the direction of the case forever. Because what Damien did next showed exactly what he had been hiding behind that charming smile. He went still, completely still. No movement, no blinking. It was like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then his entire body tensed. Evelyn tried to crawl away. Her hands were slipping on the floor. Her breath was shaking. She reached for the front door. Her fingers grazed the metal handle. Damien pulled her back, and she hit the floor hard. The sound was so loud a neighbor paused her music and looked at the window. She thought it was a fallen chair. She would later say she wished she had called someone. Evelyn cried out his name again, but it echoed off a man who had no soul left to hear it. Damien leaned close to her ear and whispered something that chilled investigators when they heard it later. He said, "No one will ever love you like I do." 7 words. 7 words that turned this from manipulation into pure cruelty. Evelyn tried to scream again. Her voice cracked. Every second felt like the world was tightening around her. This was no longer fear. It was terror. The kind that makes your body go numb because it knows what might come next. Then everything went silent. So silent that later one officer said he felt like the house itself was holding its breath. That silence was the moment before the unthinkable. Evelyn lay frozen on the floor, her breath shaking, her hands trembling so hard she could barely keep them on the tiles. She looked up at Damien, hoping to find even one trace of the man who once held her hands gently. But there was nothing there. His face looked hollow, twisted, like something had taken over him completely. Then he reached for the lights. Investigators later said this single detail was one of the most chilling parts of the entire case. Damien walked calmly toward the switch and turned off every light in the hallway, one by one, as if darkness made him stronger, as if he wanted her fear to grow until it swallowed her whole. The house fell into shadows. Evelyn's breathing turned sharp, panicked. She whispered, "Damien, please." Her voice was cracking so much it barely sounded like a whisper. Tears streamed down her face, but she wiped them quickly because she needed to see. She needed to stay awake. She needed to live. Damien stepped closer, his silhouette towering over her. She tried to crawl backward. Her hands slipped. She hit the wall. There was nowhere else to go. Then something terrifying happened. He crouched down and stared at her in the dark. Not moving, not blinking, just watching her like she was prey, like he enjoyed the way she shook. Evelyn later could not speak, but investigators reconstructed her final moments from marks, testimony, and the layout of the house. She tried to stand. Her legs were weak. She pushed against the wall, using every ounce of strength left in her 60-year-old body. Damien rose slowly, matching every inch she gained. His breathing was slow, steady, almost relaxed. Then he whispered something that made the hairs on every officer's arm stand up when they heard it. He said, "I chose you because no one would look for you." Evelyn's knees gave out. She fell again, hitting the floor with a soft thud that neighbors later described as the moment they felt something was wrong. But no one intervened, no one knocked, no one called. She stared up at him, her tears pooling on the tiles, her voice trembling as she begged one last time for her life. She said she would give him everything. She said she forgave him. She said she just wanted to see tomorrow. Damien took a slow step forward, then another, then another. The fate that followed in that darkness would soon shake the entire town and make national headlines. The darkness inside that house felt alive, heavy, thick. It wrapped itself around Evelyn until she could barely breathe. Her hands were shaking so violently she pressed them against her chest just to feel something steady. Damien's shadow moved closer, slow and deliberate, like he was savoring every second of her terror. He reached out. Evelyn flinched so hard she hit her head against the wall. Her vision blurred. She blinked rapidly, trying to stay conscious, trying to stay aware, trying to hold on to any chance of escape. She whispered a prayer, not for mercy, not for forgiveness, just for one more minute of life. That was when Damien grabbed her arm. She gasped, the sound sharp and painful. Her body twisted as she tried to pull away. At 60, she did not have strength, but she had instinct. She had fear. She had the desperate will of someone who realized she was seconds away from never seeing daylight again. In one sudden burst of strength she did not know she had, Evelyn pushed her entire body weight forward. She slipped from his grip and crawled across the hallway floor. Her hands scraped against the tiles. Her knees burned. She did not care. She saw the front door, just a few feet away. Her fingers touched the bottom edge of the doorframe. Hope hit her chest like a spark. She reached up for the handle. Her palm touched metal. She twisted. The door did not move. The top lock was latched, a lock she rarely used, a lock she never closed herself. Damien had locked it earlier. Evelyn's breath broke. A short, desperate cry escaped her lips. Behind her, Damien stepped forward, his shoes tapping slowly against the tiles. He did not rush. He did not panic. He did not even sound angry. He sounded calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made officers later say they had never encountered a suspect this cold. Evelyn's hands kept twisting the lock. Her fingers slipped from sweat. She tried again, and again, and again. But her strength was fading. Her arms were trembling. Her vision was dimming. Then she felt his hand on her shoulder. Her entire body froze. She let out one last cry, not of pain, but of heartbreak. A sound that neighbors later described as the most haunting noise they had ever heard in their lives. A sound of someone realizing they would not survive. Damien leaned close to her ear. He whispered, "It is too late." Those were the last words Evelyn ever heard. The next moments were so violent, so frantic, so heartbreaking that officers refused to describe them publicly. But they left enough evidence behind to reveal exactly what Evelyn went through in her final seconds. Enough to make grown detectives walk out of the room and sit on the curb with their head in their hands. And once the house fell silent again, Damien did something that shocked investigators more than anything he had done so far. The house went completely silent. For almost 2 full minutes, nothing moved. No footsteps, no breathing, no sound at all. It was the kind of silence that feels wrong, heavy, unnatural. Then Damien stood up. He walked calmly through the hallway, stepping around what he had done as if it meant nothing. He looked almost relaxed, like the storm inside him had finally settled. Investigators later said this calmness disturbed them more than the crime itself. He went to the bathroom and washed his hands. Slowly, carefully. He scrubbed under his nails. He rinsed his wrists. He wiped his face with a towel and stared at himself in the mirror. One detective said it looked like he was admiring his reflection. Then he did something that made the entire case explode. He changed his clothes, folded the ones he had been wearing, placed them in a plastic bag, and walked into the kitchen. He made himself a sandwich. A sandwich. While Evelyn lay lifeless just a few feet away, Damien calmly ate at the table like it was any normal afternoon. He even checked his phone. He scrolled. He smiled at something on the screen. Then he opened the curtains. He wanted the neighbors to see him moving around. He wanted everything to look normal. Investigators later said it was obvious he thought he had plenty of time before anyone would notice Evelyn was missing. But he made one mistake. A neighbor across the street saw him open the curtains and noticed a red smear on his arm that he had missed. She froze. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. She called Evelyn's niece. That phone call would trigger a chain reaction that would expose Damien's secret life, his past victims, and the horrifying truth about why he targeted Evelyn in the first place. And at that exact moment, Damien made his most disturbing decision yet. The call from the neighbor changed everything. Evelyn's niece tried calling her immediately, but the phone rang and rang with no answer. That was unusual. Evelyn never ignored calls, especially from family. Within minutes, her niece called the police for a welfare check. Inside the house, Damien felt the shift. He heard the vibration of Evelyn's phone from the hallway. He walked over and looked at the caller ID. He stared at it for a long moment, his face completely blank. Then he did something that sent chills through the officers who later reviewed the scene. He placed the phone gently beside her lifeless body, almost like he wanted it to look symbolic. Almost like he was proud of what he had done. Then he moved through the house with a plan. He grabbed Evelyn's purse, her bank cards, her car keys, her documents. He did not run. He did not panic. He moved like someone who had done this before. The most terrifying detail was this. He went into Evelyn's closet and took one of her scarves, a soft blue knit scarf she wore every winter. He held it for a moment, examining it like he was choosing a souvenir, then slipped it into his pocket. Investigators believe he had done this with other victims, taking something sentimental to keep as a reminder, a trophy. Then he stood in the middle of the living room, breathing slowly, listening to the quiet of the house one last time. He whispered something under his breath, words no one will ever know. Because then he walked out the back door, not the front, not the one with neighbors watching. He used the side alley and disappeared behind the row of houses like a shadow slipping away at sunset. By the time the first police car pulled onto the street, Damien was already gone, vanished, leaving nothing behind but a nightmare waiting to be discovered. Officers would open that door minutes later and witness a scene that made some of them step outside to breathe. Evelyn's final moments, the darkness she faced, the fear she endured, would soon become national news. Her story would break hearts across the country. But the world had one final shock coming, because Damien was not finished yet. When police finally entered the house, they found Evelyn, lifeless, silent. Her home, once warm and full of memories, had become a crime scene that would haunt every officer who stepped inside. Every detail told the story of terror she had endured. The marks on her arms, the scattered papers, the overturned furniture, even the small blue scarf Damien had taken was gone, leaving only an empty space like a silent witness. Investigators uncovered Damien's history, patterns, victims, lies, court records showing manipulation, exploitation, and more. He was a man who preyed on trust, on loneliness, on hope, and Evelyn had been his most recent target. News of her death spread fast. Friends and neighbors were in shock. How could someone so young, so charming, commit such horror in a home filled with love just days before? This case became a chilling reminder that appearances can be deadly, that evil can hide behind a smile, and that trust can sometimes cost more than anyone is prepared to pay. If you are watching this now, comment where you are watching from. Tell us what you think about this case. Would you have seen the signs? Could this have been prevented? And if you want to hear more stories that shock, scare, and move you, subscribe now. These are real stories that make you question the world, make you feel every heartbreak, every betrayal, every terrifying choice. Evelyn's story will stay with everyone who hears it. But remembering her means we honor her life, her love, and the lessons her tragedy leaves behind.